This is the To Be Single or Not to Be podcast, and we're doing what? Running it back.
So welcome back to the To Be Single or Not to Be podcast in the Running It Back series with Shanna Montana. And today we are running it back to episode, what was number 15 of the show. And it was titled Breaking Generational Curses, Setting Boundaries, and Healing Before You Get to the Relationship. And we recorded this episode back on June the 10th of 2019. And what I want to say about this before we even dive into the topics that we talked about on the show is I have a completely different perspective of the thought process of healing before you get into the relationship. Because what I now know about healing, I did a whole episode, a whole series titled Healing is a Journey on YouTube. Go watch it if you have not already. Is that healing is exactly that. Healing is a journey. Healing is not this race. It is not this sprint, but it is a marathon that you are consistently running throughout your life and throughout any relationships to the point where you cannot say, I've healed, period. Now I'm ready for a relationship. However, what you can say is I have done enough healing to be ready for a relationship. And I understand as I go on that journey of getting to know someone and getting into a relationship that my healing will continue. My healing will then continue with them. What may look like, going to therapy together, just uncovering things that you all may have differences on that you all can work through to make sure that you are in a healed enough space to want to be in that relationship and to give it a fighting chance of being successful at it. So what's changed is that, back then I was like, healing you before the relationship. And there is no healing you before the relationship, but there is getting to a space where you are healed enough to be ready for a relationship. Because we all know, I've been there before, where one, sometimes we have healing to do and we're in denial about it. I know for a while, and I've talked about it quite a few times, that there was a point in time where I just did not want to go to therapy because I knew that I had some stuff that I needed to work through. And I was like, I'm just not ready to face those parts of myself. And I was honest about that. But I got to a place like, I got sick and tired of being sick and tired, and I hit my own rock bottom where I recognized like I have to do the work that's necessary for me to even be in a positive relationship with myself. So my healing journey, while it was, I feel like part of it was sparked due to a relationship ending. The beautiful side of it was that once it was sparked, it helped me to realize like, okay, there is more work that I need to do on myself. Like there's more work that Shayna needs to do on Shayna, but in doing the work on Shayna is going to allow me to get to a space where when my next relationship comes along, I now also know the new ways that I need to navigate relationships. And it's crazy because one would think, okay, you started this show back in 2019 and you had an idea, you had this relationship awakening. So you had an idea of how to improve in relationships. But like I said in one of the earlier episodes, that's what it's about. It's about the growth. It's about evolving. It's about wanting to move onward and upward and just do better in whatever it is that we're doing. So that is why I have episodes that I recorded in 2019, 2020, some 21 and 22 that I recorded that I may not feel exactly the same about. But it's about recognizing, okay, that was a thought process that I had. And I think this is something that we can apply to relationships. Like that was a thought process that I had then. It might have been okay at the time, maybe not. But now that I have done the work to know better, I have a true desire to do better. And I only want to be in relationship with people that want to do better with me. So one, that relationship with myself, the relationship with yourself is inevitable. But when you make a choice to bring someone else into the picture, recognizing, like, what do they think about that process of wanting to do better? Because as wild, as unhinged as it may sound, there are people that are perfectly fine with sitting in a wild space of what may, from someone's perspective, may be unhealed, it may be unhinged, it may be all things negative, and they are completely okay with that. But it's all about perspective. They may, sometimes I've talked about this before. You may look at a person's life and think that like, it's just chaos over there. And they may think that they're living their best life. And I think that's why it's, I guess, important to mind your own business. Like one of my new mottos, I can't worry about it. I really can't worry about it. But I always say, I just try to live by example. I put the information out there. I hope that the individuals that want it receive it. I think the people that are supposed to get it will get it. And for those that choose not to, we can only say may the odds be ever in their favor and choose that they go forward. But just be mindful of, getting in a relationship with people that feel that way, that feel that if your perspective doesn't match theirs, you don't really have to worry about it or get involved with it. But just be mindful of, if you choose to get in a relationship with a person that feels that way, you're probably gonna have a hard time, if at all, able to change their mind and want to do something different. So that's probably another episode for a whole another day, but I wanted to get at 2 cents. Now, moving into breaking generational curses, setting boundaries, and, healing you before the relationship. One thing we talked about, that we talk about often, my friends and I, because I am of the millennial generation, is something that I still hold true to. We felt this way then and we feel this way now, that we are one of the first generations, to really tap into breaking generational curses and like setting real boundaries and doing the work on our own healing, so that, and doing it in a place where there's no shame attached to it, so that we can show up and be our best selves for the world, for our children, for the people that are going to look up to us in the world. And while I understand that, us being the first generation to do this groundbreaking thing is different from, I'm not saying that no other generation, because it's crazy I have to give this caveat because the world that we live in, I'm not saying that any other generation has not broken any kind of curse or done any kind of work in this area, because we've seen plenty of movements in the world that have been successful. But when I really think about it, I would say for the age group of, whatever the age group of millennials are, I'm 38, so we fall within that category. When we look at our parents, when we look at some of our older siblings, when we look at some of the people that, maybe in the workplace that may be a little bit older than us, depending on, what it is that we're doing, you run into a lot of people, if we're being honest, that have done things their way for a really long time, and they've done it in a very unhealthy way. And not saying everything, but a lot of things. They've done things in a very unhealthy way. And they are of the mindset that, you just go along to get along. You just do what your parents say. You just follow the Bible said, honor your mother and your father. This is just the way it's always been. And I know that we are a generation that does not live by that mantra that this is just the way that it's always been, because this is just the way it's always been, has been fucked up. And so what we are now going to do and have made a very conscious and wildly intentional decision to do that is not always received well, and you got to be okay with that. It's just knowing that we are going to move different. We are going to be the ones that do our part to see, for the generations after us, to see that you can do things differently, and you can do it with love, and you can do it with compassion and understanding and empathy. And everybody won't receive it well, and that's okay. But for the ones that want to receive it well and want to do better, those are the ones that we're doing it for. So I just wanted to say that, if you are a millennial and you hold true to that, I think that this is a beautiful thing. So the other part is, we didn't really talk about this on the show, but I want to just talk about the fact that I firmly believe that breaking generational curses is just more than financial. And of course, hence the title of this episode, we know that. But I want to just say that because many times when you get on social media, you see people all the time, I want to get this land, I want to get this property, I want to get this money to break generational curses. That's the largest message. I don't care what anybody says. That is the largest way that I see on my timeline generational curses being broken or generational wealth being built. Like, I want to stop, my family not having money, my family not having nothing. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to get to the bag. I'm going to get this, but it's all related to money. And I just want to say this. While again, we didn't talk about this on the last episode, but I think it's imperative that I say it now. Breaking a generational curse is much deeper than just the generational wealth that you're trying to build. And the other part of that is, if you build all this generational wealth, but you treat your family like shit, you don't show compassion, you don't show up in a space where, it's even welcoming or warm, or you don't have kindness, then nobody's going to care. Most people are not going to care about that generational wealth that you've built. So if you're a person that knows that, I'm working to build all this generational wealth, but how I treat the people of my family does not align with people even wanting to have anything to do with me. Now, of course, there's always going to be somebody that don't care how they treated, the money is going to be more important. But just for me, when I think about breaking generational curses and what I want for the world and for my family, yeah, the generational wealth is great. I'm never going to act like money doesn't matter. But I just want to put that out there into the world. If you think about it, I want you all to know that it is bigger than just, the money that's coming in, breaking that curse of poverty or that poverty mindset. That's important and needs to be done. But also, like this episode, and we're about to get into it, just think about, how do you treat your family? Do you treat your family so bad, or do you show up in a space where it's so negative? Like, you are the problem. You are the common denominator, that to the point where if you get all this money, you're able to break these curses with this generational wealth, is anybody even gonna want the money? So make sure you think about that the next time you get ready to show out. Now, going forward, something I wanted to talk about in regards to breaking generational curses that really goes back to relationships and how we show up in the world is that, the people on this episode, my sisters, my wonderful sisters that are still my sisters and friends present day, what we talked about on this episode was like what really made us want to break these generational curses and recognize, not really like we sat down and had a kumbaya and said, we got to break the generational curses of our family. But it was like, if you are in dysfunction for so long, like you're seeing crazy shit around you from a very high level, you're seeing the people that are doing the things that should not be done, and nobody can correct them because you don't correct people. Nobody can tell them that they're wrong because that's just how they are. Nobody can hold them accountable. It's like we were able to, and the people that were on this episode, we were all met in college. It's like being able to step away from a highly dysfunctional situation or just a dysfunctional situation where generational curses lie and go to some place like college or step outside of your household and travel and be exposed to different things and see like, not everybody functions like this. There's love in the world. There's understanding in the world. There's accountability in the world. And I think a lot of that came from like college. You go to college and you realize like, no, you just can't do what you want to do. You cannot not be held accountable. You cannot talk crazy to people and not have a consequence. You cannot just, you can't fight people and think that it's okay. So being able to step away from it really showed us that there's something different. And I think the thing we have to be able to apply is many times we know that in relationships, people get in relationships that are super dysfunctional. And a lot of times it's because you have seen that dysfunctional love in relationships in your family or relationships around you, and you tend to think that that's normal. And so that's a curse that you have to break, because I'm a firm believer that at some point in your life, especially if you happen to be doing the work, and even if not sometimes, the dysfunction is kind of like a choice. You don't have to be a person that's an expert on love or relationships to know when you are in like a fucked up situation, or you're letting somebody treat you bad, or you're treating somebody bad, or you're allowing bad things to be done to you. At some point, your dysfunction becomes a choice. I'm signing up for this, and it may be due to the trauma of the generational curse of my family, that everybody in my family has done nothing but have terrible relationships, and they tell us we should stick it out with a man no matter what, and they tell us that we should, stay in that relationship because that man going somewhere, or we can't do no better. It's all kinds of things that could be implanted in your mind that may cause you to make those dysfunctional choices, but it's still a choice that we're making. So that brings us back to this. One of the things we have to make sure that we do when it comes to breaking a generational curse within ourselves, within our families, and with our partners is that when you meet a person, we have to have more conversations about that. We take a lot of time to get to know a person and ask them, about their life, about their career, about their dreams, their goals. But I want us to start tapping into going back into the foundation of the family. If you are, and I'm going to say just there's always a caveat. There's some people that, their family has not been around at all for different reasons. It could be people passed away, adopted, a lot of things. But typically for people that have a relationship present day with their family, whether that is good, bad, or indifferent, and find out, what was their family dynamic? Was it loving? Was it crazy? Do they get along with both of their parents? If both of their parents are around, if somebody's not around, why are they not around? If they aren't around, how do they feel about that? What is their relationship if parents are there or one parent is there, with their siblings? Does their family get together? How do they grow up learning about accountability? Did they grow up under the thought process that you just do what adults say, you just do what people say and you go forward? So finding out, what does love look like in their family? Because we meet people all the time that they'll say, my parents loved me, they love me, but we never really said it growing up. They didn't start saying that until they, became an adult and formed other relationships, and it was something that was normal. So it's one of those things I want us to just make sure that we are paying attention to that and having conversations around that, because I think that is neglected. And I think part of breaking generational curses, since this is a show about relationships, we have to understand that, it has to start there in regards to the family and the structure and where did that person come from? Because I'm also a believer in this. If you have a person that you're talking about family and you're talking about generational curses that you want to break, and you find that they have a background and now a thought process that just does not align with yours, I am not of the notion that you are now the person that needs to come in and teach them about love and teach them about breaking that generational curse and teach them what good looks like. You have to know if there's an opportunity to help a person do a little better because they're on that journey already, versus a person that's at like a level 1 and they have no desire to go from it. So I'm not saying that you can't meet somebody and they can't be exactly where you are, or further than you, or on this very high path. But if you meet somebody and they are going against the grain, like they had all the bullshit going on in their family and they think that that shit is still okay present day, it is not your job to try to change that behavior of a grown-ass man or woman. It is your job to meet somebody that hopefully is of the mindset of you, that is doing the forward thinking work that you're doing, and hopefully you all can help one another and teach one another things and see, maybe things they hadn't thought of in that perspective, somebody that's open to it. But many times we'll take a person that, if we're on a scale of 1 to 10, we're at like an 8 and they're at like a -5, and we want to pull them all the way up, and then we're frustrated when this person has no ownership, has no accountability, believes in cursing people out, believes in fighting, doesn't know what love is, and we trying to teach them that. What? Because we date what? People, not projects. So I want you to keep that in mind as a conversation that we need to go forward with. Now, the next thing is we talked about on this episode was in regards to, breaking generational curses and setting boundaries, was that like, when you grow up, you have to think, you go through a lot of things that sometimes, because you're just a child, you do not have control over. But once you do become an adult, many of the guests on that show were like, how many times do I have to experience or see crazy shit and think that it's okay? I don't as an adult. So when I'm a child, I go through those things. I just have to deal with them. But as I become an adult and I know that this is not okay, I'm now going to make a conscious decision that I'm not going to function in that manner. And especially right now at this big old age I am, I'm not going to function in chaos in certain matters. And what that comes down to is just really removing myself. And we talked a lot about that. Like, what does that look like? Because one of my guests was like, she don't play the radio with it. She does not mind opting out of family. And so what I'll say is that I'm not of the mindset that your family do something you don't like and you cut them off. But I do think that when it comes down to breaking a generational curse and setting a boundary, that is something that we do have to teach people. We have to teach our parents. A lot of us have to teach teaching our parents that. A lot of us have to, then you have to teach a person in a relationship that, in regards to setting a boundary, because many times, most times, all the time, people don't know what a boundary is until you tell them it's a problem. So if I tell someone that, this is just a wild example, this has never happened to me, it's just something that, could happen to somebody. Say a boundary for you, and this is simple, is when I'm in the bathroom, that I want you to knock before you come in and not just open the door and come in. I've never dealt with that in my life, family, or relationships. But let's just say if that's the boundary. Some people may think if you're in a relationship that there's no boundaries, in the sense that you in the bathroom, I could just walk in, we go together, we've seen each other naked, we've seen it out. But no, that's a boundary for me. But until they do it and you tell them, because you're probably not walking around thinking like, I need to tell you, because you might have grown up where people know you knock before you come in the room. I'm like that now, period. If a door is closed and I need to come in, I'm going to knock and wait for you to say come in before I come in. But some people might not have grown up like that and know that they need to wait for permission. They might have just walked through the door. So that's a very broad example, but it's an example just to show that when it comes to boundaries, whether it be with a parent, family member, or in relationships, one, you have to tell a person what the boundary is. And then that person has to make a choice to respect it, because that's the other thing. A person can say, I'm not going to respect your boundary, and do what they want to do. And then you should leave. But you have a choice to say, okay, I'm going to try this another way. We're going to talk about this and decide what direction we want to go in. But the other side of that, I think we have to make sure we are super aware of, is just boundaries are really another way. And another way you could say is that I'm going to just teach you how to treat me. And in teaching you, that doesn't mean that I'm going to teach a 12-week course. I'm going to, as we go throughout this, getting to know one another, as we go throughout this relationship, I'm going to tell you things that I like, that I do not like, that I would like for you not to do. And I expect the same thing from you, so we can both show up in the space the same way. But on this episode, additionally, we more so talked about it from that family perspective, and I wanted to just bring it in for the relationship perspective as well, that when it comes down to boundaries and breaking the boundaries and generational curses, they go hand in hand, because many times the curse that you're breaking, a lot of times, curses that we are breaking, well, I'll say about 50-50. I would say generational curses and boundaries go hand in hand about 50-50, because some curses are what they are. Like, say if you are a person, this is one you hear a lot of times in the Black community, like we want to break the curse of having children out of wedlock. Now we know views have changed a lot of times over the years about people having children out of wedlock, and it doesn't have such a negative connotation in some people's eyes. But for some people, that is a goal that they have, where they don't want to have a child out of wedlock. So that's one thing that's separate from necessarily having a boundary. But a boundary may be, you know, when it comes to, I'll tell you all, a boundary may be for, you know, parents. Just being able to, you know, talk to your parents and tell them what they can and cannot do, conversations they can and cannot have with you, ways they can and cannot show up in your life. So I think it comes down to us understanding it has to go the same way over to your relationships. And that's something that I think we tend to get into relationships, and many times we are just so enamored with one another. We're in that, you know, fairy tale stage in the beginning, and we tend to let so much shit fly because we want to feel like, you know, I just want to go along to get along. I just want this to be easy. I'm not a hard person to deal with. And in reality, we are setting ourselves up for failure. Ask me how I know. Because I used to be this much so, very much so, go along to get along. Like, I'm not an argumentative person. I'm not a person that's easily upset. You know, I am a person that people can do certain things that if I don't think it's a big deal, I'm like, I'm going to let it ride. Because, you know, I used to think I don't want to be that nagging ass bitch. But now I'm working on figuring out what the balance looks like for me in my next relationship. Because it's nothing that it's nothing that somebody's going to do to me that I don't like that I'm not going to say anything about. Now, mind you, again, I said find the balance, because I don't want to be a person that, you know, you left a sock on the floor and now I'm having a fit. And mind you, I'm not even kind of a have a fit bitch, but, you know, you leave a sock on the floor and it's like this big deal. No, that's not what I'm referring to. But I'm referring to things where I've dealt with people in my past who, you know, they lied about shit. It might have been stuff I considered a white lie, but I let it ride. But no, a lie is a lie. It was people who, you know, I would say miscommunicated about things, because I also feel like, you know, you tell me a piece of the information, but not all the information. And I know you ain't tell me all the information, but I'll let you ride. Can't do that no more. Also, lying by omission. You told me you talked to 3 bitches. I know you talked to 4. Why ain't you tell me about the 4th bitch? That's a term of endearment, ladies. But, you know, so I realize that now for me, my boundaries are like, I'm working on what the balance looks like, because honestly, I don't want to, so it goes to this. I don't want to be a person that feels like I have to say something about everything. But as I talk this through to you all, and I was having a conversation with some friends about this earlier, I guess the balance is now making sure that as I go through my selection process with dating, that I try to do the best of a job that I can with only dating people who I feel align with me enough where I won't have to have those kinds of issues consistently. I'm not perfect. No one is perfect. There's not an expectation ever that there will never be a conversation or a conflict or an issue with something. Like, that's going to happen. But when I look at those little things like dealing with somebody, because I don't care, white lie, big lie, you're a liar, a fucking liar. So I don't want to deal with somebody who's a liar. I don't want to deal with somebody I'm not going to deal with somebody who's a liar by omission. I'm not going to deal with someone who has communication issues. You know, so it's certain things now in order for me to make sure that my boundaries are respected and that I break the generational curse of dealing with fucking liars, that I put certain things in place so I don't have to go through those things again. And I think that's what we as women have to make sure that we are implementing, and just know what our own balance looks like. Because I was so guilty, you know, society and just so many things can pile up on us just to make us feel like, you know, that whole be a man's peace. We all need to be peaceful to one another. And I think the best way for us to be peaceful to one another is to all do a better job with working to be in relationship with people that we are more equally aligned with, so that our thought process is close to the same, our temperament is the same, the way we move in the world. You know, liars should date liars. Just to keep it simple, if you lie, a liar. I know, I'll never forget, I dealt with a bozo once. I had his birth chart made for me, or read, whatever. Somebody got me his birth chart, and throughout the chart, and mind you, I ain't saying astrology rules all, but across his birth chart, it kept saying he was a liar. And I was like, I told him, like, your birth chart say you lie a lot. And he was like, everybody lie a lot. Like, he didn't like try to push back. And I should have fucking left then, but you know, you live and you learn. Experiences is what it is. You know. The next thing is that when it comes to, you know, breaking generational curses and boundaries and healing, I just want to just say that when it comes to those things, just remember, you know, as you go through your journey and you start to understand what the generational curses look like that you want to break, as you start to look at like what boundaries are, and do your own research to learn more about boundaries. And if you are doing a good job with implementing them, if you've implemented any at all, what work you need to do there. But additionally with the healing, just knowing that as you go through the process, you are going to run into people, places, and things where you have to confront things and deal with different situations and be able to accept some things for what they are and still move on from them. And so in this conversation, a huge part of it, what we talked about was that as you go through this process, you may never get that apology that you wanted when you have to revisit some things, i.e. having talks with parents about things that happened to you as a child. And sometimes we just want the parents to be able to listen to us and hear us out, but you may never get that apology. You may never get that ownership. You may never get the conversation, to make it plain. I'm grateful that, and I would say I come from a household, I was raised by my grandparents and my mom, but even now I feel like with my mom, if there are things that I want to talk about, that she's willing to have that conversation and not sit there and just throw blame back. So I feel like that I'm grateful for that, but there are sometimes some people you won't even be able to get the conversation, and you got to be okay with it. And now that it's like you're an adult child in a sense. A psychologist told me that we're all kind of like these adult children that have things that happen to us as a child, and until we work through them as an adult, they kind of stay around and rule how we operate in the world. And you really, I don't want to feel like that. I don't want that in the back of my mind. And the only way to really address it is to kind of address it head on. So I think ultimately we have to keep those things in the forefront of our minds. And I think that it's all about the consistency of having these conversations and having an awareness and ruling this ship by what you desire for your life personally, not what social media says you should do, not what friends or family say you should do exactly, or not even exactly what I say you should do. But I think that it's all about just recognizing, if you break it down into the overall category of like, what are the generational curses I've seen that my family has had with just the family directly? What are the generational curses within my family that have spilled over into relationships? Or just for, you could say for our race, what are some of the curses you've seen in relationships that you want to see done differently? And then when it moves over to boundaries, what are some boundaries that you feel like, you feel violated after these things happen to you, and you wish they wouldn't have happened, and they might not have happened if you would have spoke up about them? We have to make sure we're consistently doing that, because as I was listening to this episode and thinking about where my life is now, that was a huge part of what I said, that whole go along to get along bullshit. I thought I had boundaries, but I really didn't. I had them a little bit. They weren't strong enough. They were strong enough. I was not implementing them consistently enough, because I felt like I had it under control, or I feel like I just thought that it's not a big deal. And it was. And yeah, I'm leaving it at that. I thought it wasn't a big deal, and it was. It was a lot of things that was a big deal. So for me, what they say, what military, see something, say something. Bitch, ain't nothing you can let me see that I ain't gonna say something about. Let's be clear. So that is why we have to have the balance. And then the last part of, healing you before the relationship, I don't agree with that, and I don't think that's a thing, and no one should. Healing is an absolute journey. Healing is ongoing. Healing is something you do every day. Having these conversations with you all, because that's what it is. We're just having a conversation. These are healing for me, to be able to like talk things out, because I think about them. But as I go through, as we do these shows, you have notes and bullets you want topics, but I really just speak from the heart to you guys. So it's just a matter of recognizing that my healing journey is ongoing. And I can only be in relationship with people that have experienced or are on their own healing journey with me, because we got to heal and grow together and understand. I think that's a part of another thing with breaking the generational curse, is that as life goes on, people change, things change, the world changes. The world changes every day. How can we expect people not to? So just remember that back in 2019, breaking that tune ain't changed. We still out here working to break generational curses every day in every fashion, and we are breaking them. Absolutely, we are breaking them. And remember, breaking generational curses is more than money. It's about actions too. But boundaries, make sure you are implementing them. Don't let anybody walk all over you. You don't have to. And healing. Get your healing, no matter what that may look like. So for some, it looks like therapy. Some it may be, listening to podcasts or YouTube like you're doing right now. Some it may be reading articles. Some it may be getting out in nature. Some it may be, talking to God. That need to be included in every plan with me. But it's going to look different ways. So just do the work you need to do, and rest in knowing that at the end of the day, you will absolutely be okay. So signing off, yours truly, Shanna Montana.